Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space. Hope you enjoy. Story number 1, With Big Iron on His Hip, written by In Babylon They Wept. Earl had been many things in his life. A lithium miner, an electrician, a structural engineer. The little fiasco on Neo-Tallahassee had closed a lot of doors, but it did swing one wide open. Only a few days had passed after the incident before he'd been offered a role as a weapons designer. It was pretty good work, honestly. Sure, some days it was just something he did to pay the bills, but every once in a while inspiration would strike hard, and he'd ride those highs for days on end. Today was one of those days. The entire R&D division had been struggling to make a reloading mechanism for the DFP Mac gunship. The biggest issue was that they needed to be simple enough for the mass production, but there were so many intermediate steps and spatial translations that it just didn't seem possible. Him and the boys had been chewing on their way through it for days now, but it wasn't until Earl had gone home and flipped through his childhood photos that inspiration struck him. It was so obvious, so practical, and yet aesthetic. The best part wasn't even how clever the design was. It was knowing that he'd contributed something to the group that they would never have thought of themselves. Something that he only knew about because of his long and storied history of being a hick. He opened up his messenger and sent out a mass. I figured out how to make a reloader for the Super Mac that only uses one part. Meeting tomorrow at 9. I'm a genius. The others had arrived a few minutes early to the meeting, but Earl refused to start until 9 sharp. Gotta get that dramatic tension up, he explained sagely. The others dealt with it peacefully enough. They were content to let him be a bit of a prima donna. They all simply kept their eyes on the war clock, and as soon as the hour hand moved into position, he sprung into motion, his lines as hilariously over-rehearsed as any infomercial salesman. Gentlemen, let me start this meeting up with the question, what is the largest number of shots the MAC gun has yet to fire in any one engagement? Sheila grinned, bemused at the exaggerated pitch. The two looked at him expectantly, and he shrugged, unsure and willing to guess. I have no idea. How about you, Val? Do you know? The crustacean curled its antenna around each of the consternation, a gesture that Earl had dubbed the double helix of please help. Is it 4 shots? Brisinge snorted. He'd been trying his best to wait his turn, but hearing the wrong answer seemed to strain his self-control. It's 5. For hive engagement off Kepler 17 Crofts 15. Earl cut him off before he could deliver a halting play-by-play of the entire hour-and-a-half military engagement. Lost. Also, the Dark Forest Pact's largest military defeat to date. Can you all guess how this simplifies our problem with the reloading mechanism? That was actually very useful information. Shiloh tapped his claws on the table, thinking as hard as he could. An idea was starting to form in his mind, too, and he voiced its roots, checking if he was on the same track as Earl. It means that anything that exchanges sustained fire for rapid fire is going to be an improvement? Earl clapped his hands together in joy. Bingo! Now, take a look at this bad boy. He clicked the button on the projector, pulling up a 3D model he'd started working on the night prior. It was fantastically simple, a rotating iron cage with a ferroslug already slotted into each of its 6 equidistant chambers. There were no pulleys or complex chambering mechanisms. All it needed to get its next slug out was to rotate the wheel structure. The wheelhouse can be machined out of one part, cast, or even built as a wireframe. I'm not actually sure which is easiest, but all 3 types fit into the mechanism just fine. He clicked his remote again, and the projector showed the exploded view of the next-gen gunship, the 3 different types of rotating parts moving in and out of position with ease. His 3 co-workers considered this silently. He tried to give them time, but he was so sure that it was a great idea that he couldn't help but goad them a little. So, what do you all think? There was a pause as the 3 looked amongst each other, unsure of who would go first. Shiloh wound up taking the reins first, a look of genuine pride on his face as he addressed Earl. "It is so simple, I'm mad that I didn't think of it first. It gives the craft a slightly larger cross-sectional area, but that would probably be offset by the improved firing rate. The quicker it can drop off its payload, the quicker it can leave the battlefield unscathed." Val nodded along with this, jumping in only as Shiloh had finished. "The counter-torque of the wheel might require some odd features on the craft, but it's still a lot easier to just toss the vertical iron thruster on one side than it is to work with those finicky little conveyors. You got my blessing, Earl. This is great." Brisinge had the final voice. 3 sets of eyes locked onto him. Earl held his breath, hoping for an across-the-board decision. "Fire rate easily tripled. That alone justifies this. I'll begin work immediately." Earl couldn't help it. He cheered. He probably could have helped throwing the rest of his notes in the air while playing an air guitar, but that would have taken more restraint than he'd shown at any point in his life prior. There were 3 sets of congratulations as they left the meeting to begin their work on the mechanism in earnest. It had been a long day at work, but a happy one. Earl was back home now, tapping his pencil nervously against his desk. He was never good at this sort of thing, never sure how to plow forward with it. That had always been the bit of a problem for him. He was a clever man, and clever men always wanted clever solutions. Sometimes you just had to settle for a messy, ugly path straight through the mud. He put the lead tip to the synthetic fibers, beginning to write. "Dear Pa, I know we didn't leave on the best terms, but I figured that you'd want to hear this. Remember that old 6-shooter that we used to go plinking with? Well, hear this. I just made one that shoots bullets bigger than a camper van. We'd been..." He kept going, trading on a few pages, explaining in great detail just how the Shiva-class MAC gunships worked before calling it quits. He had half a moment of doubt as he put it in an envelope, but he fought it down. Bonds didn't fix themselves, mended with patience. More nervous than he cared to admit, he put the letter in his delivery box, knowing that it would be shuttled off station by the next day. When he woke up in the morning to check on it, he wasn't sure if he was relieved or disappointed to see that it was too late for him to change his mind. It had already been sent. Story number 2. A Useful Skill, written by Slow AD 2584. "Our weapons are ineffective against their energy shields, Captain. Their grid scramble frequency matrix is scattered over 9 desperate frequencies. We have no way to counter the shields without knowing the exact frequencies of each grid location. But if we can manage that, we could hack their shields and leave them vulnerable." "If that's what the techs say, then that's what we need to figure out. A 9x9 matrix, you say? With 9 variables. Why, that's 9 cubed. 729 possible solutions. That sounds uncrackable. Sir! We have oncoming torpedoes." "How many?" Innumerable. It's a constant incoming stream, in 1s and 2s, in random arrangements, and they, seem to be heavily armored, with only one side being vulnerable to our laser point defense system. Our targeting computers will not be able to keep up. Some will certainly get through." "So, this is it, gentlemen. It has been an honor to serve with..." Sir, I may, have a solution. Glavian!" It was a 2 crypto tech. From the back corner, the captain squirmed in discomfort. He never learned the kid's name, and the guy was seriously weird, and never spoke. "Solution to what, shipmate?" The captain was vaguely certain that Winston's Urgle something. "Well, sir, all of it, sir." "Tell us what you need, and we've not got very much time." "Well, yes, certainly. I need a VR headset, just one controller and a virtual glove, and a set up a numeric keypad." The captain gestured, and the officer ran into the recreation room to get the realistic components. "What I don't understand. Please explain, shipmate." The cryptotech had already disassembled the bridge console and was splicing together the connectors to connect the VR gear with... "It seems clear to me, Captain. I just need to, just patch sensory data into virtual environment, to hack the, shields and, shoot down the missiles, manually, sir." In a rush of virtual reality gear arrived, and the cryptotech skillfully patched everything together. hurriedly donning the virtual glove and checking the power on the controller. Glove in left hand, controller in right, he stood there awkwardly for a moment before lowering the headgear into place. "But how?" the captain asked in confusion. Computer, Glavian, load up legacy game Beat Saber with the Sudoku overlay in left margin for my left hand, using authorizing my sensor plugin patches, with the captain's authorization, of course. The captain gave authorization in silent confusion. No one on the bridge had ever heard of these games. God, this tech was such a dork. As the VR headset flicked on and the bridge consoles dimmed and flickered out with a surge of data being rerouted, the crypto tech said, as to himself, "Finally, my time has come." The dance he did in all that gaming gear, patched cables flating around him as he hopped around the bridge, making lightsaber sounds with his mouth was, strange, weird, unsettling. There was even a smell of nerd sweat. How did he smuggle Cheetos aboard? But the results were undeniable. All the torpedoes were intercepted, and the enemy shields dropped repeatedly. The enemy ship disengaged. The day was saved. No one likes to talk about that day, but a discreet new fleet position was created, and a certain type of crewmen were enlisted fleet-wide. Also, every fleet line ship had a killer new gaming recreation hub installed, oddly with extensive power, sensor, and systemic tie-ins. No one ever learned what Glaven means, by the way. End of story. I would just quickly like to thank the T5 channel members and patrons. Caspar Arnholtz, Cam Maxwell, Barky, It's Difficult to Pronounce, Lord Azrakul, and Arcadian.